The evening air was still and quiet in the small apartment complex just days before Christmas. Inside her flat, the woman sat wrapped in blankets while her dog Max dozed at her feet. The wind outside howled against the corner of the building, creating a rhythmic and lonely sound. A sudden, sharp knock at the front door broke the silence and made her heart jump. She approached the door cautiously and peered through the small glass peephole. Standing in the hallway was a man dressed in a full Santa Claus costume, holding a clipboard. He held a plastic charity cup, suggesting he was one of the neighbors collecting for the holidays. She cracked the door open just a few inches, leaving the heavy security chain firmly in place. Without warning, the man lunged forward and threw his entire weight against the wooden door. The metal chain snapped with a loud crack, and the door swung open violently. The intruder's eyes were wide and filled with a terrifying manic energy as he entered. As he moved closer, the overwhelming stench of stale alcohol filled the small space. She screamed and scrambled backward until her back hit the cold surface of the wall. He grabbed her arms with a bruising grip, pinning her in place as she struggled to breathe. Suddenly, a low and guttural growl echoed from the corner of the room. Max launched himself into the air like a streak of golden fur, heading straight for the attacker. The dog's teeth sank deep into the intruder's arm, causing him to scream in agony. The man stumbled back, desperately trying to shake the determined animal off his bleeding arm. Seizing the moment, the woman reached for a heavy wooden statue on a nearby shelf. She hurled the object with all her strength, striking the man squarely in the forehead. Blood began to stream down his face, staining the fake white beard a deep, dark crimson. Max continued to bark ferociously, chasing the wounded intruder out into the hallway. She slammed the door shut and locked it, her body trembling with delayed shock. The apartment fell into a heavy, ringing silence, broken only by the dog's heavy breathing. She sank to the floor and pulled Max into a tight, tearful embrace. With shaking hands, she reached for her phone to call the emergency services. The police arrived shortly after, their blue lights flashing against the snow outside. Officers examined the snapped chain and the bloodstains left on the floor. One officer knelt down to pet Max, calling the brave dog a true holiday hero. The man in the Santa suit was apprehended a few blocks away, still bleeding from his wounds. Investigators later revealed that he had a long and violent criminal record. Most disturbing was the police's belief that the attack had not been random at all. That night, she lay awake in bed, jumpy at every small sound from the building. Max remained by her side, his presence a steady and comforting anchor in the dark. Christmas came and went, but the incident cast a long shadow over the festivities. The sense of safety she once felt in her own home had been permanently shattered. She realized that her previous feeling of security had been nothing more than an illusion. From that day on, her bond with Max grew into something unbreakable and profound. She showered him with extra treats and affection, knowing he had saved her life. The memory of those wide eyes behind the fake beard would haunt her for years to come. She would spend the rest of her life trying to repay the debt she owed to her loyal protector. The date was December 23rd, and the local department store was drowning in a sea of last-minute shoppers. Exhausted parents navigated through the narrow aisles, their shopping carts piled high with festive boxes. Most of the shelves were already bare, showing only the skeletal remains of what used to be a full inventory. Shoppers seemed frantic, grabbing at any remaining item that looked like a decent gift for their children. Deep in the heart of the toy section, a single, brightly colored package sat alone on a middle shelf. It was the year's hottest item, a must-have gadget that had been sold out across the entire city. Two pairs of hands reached for the box at the exact same moment from opposite sides. A tall man with a tired face locked eyes with a woman who held the other side of the package. Neither shopper moved to let go, their fingers tightening around the cardboard edges. Arguments broke out instantly, their voices cutting through the ambient noise of Christmas carols. The man insisted he had seen it first, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. The woman countered that her hand had touched the box a split second before his. Nearby shoppers began to slow down, sensing the growing volatility of the situation. The man gave a sudden, sharp tug, trying to yank the toy from the woman's grasp. She stumbled forward but refused to release her grip, digging her heels into the linoleum floor. Frustration boiled over into physical aggression as the man shoved the woman's shoulder. She gasped as she hit a shelf behind her, sending several smaller items tumbling to the ground. Recovering quickly, the woman lunged back at him with a primal scream of rage. In a moment of pure animalistic desperation, the man leaned down and bit the woman's forearm. A piercing scream rang out through the store, silencing the holiday music for a heartbeat. Blood began to seep through the fabric of her sleeve, staining the floor beneath her. Witnesses gasped and backed away, creating a wide circle of empty space around the two combatants. Despite the injury, the woman still did not let go of the toy, clutching it with her other hand. Store employees could be seen running toward the disturbance, their radios crackling with frantic calls. In the far distance, the low wail of a police siren began to rise over the city traffic. The man suddenly dropped his end of the toy, his chest heaving with heavy, ragged breaths. He looked around at the staring crowd as if waking from a nightmare, his eyes cold and empty. Without a word, he turned and began to walk toward the exit, ignoring the chaos he left behind. The woman slumped to the floor, cradling the toy against her chest like it was a living thing. Officers arrived moments later, their heavy boots thudding against the hard floor. They quickly intercepted the man before he could reach the sliding glass doors. A female officer knelt beside the victim, applying a temporary bandage to the bite wound. The woman's face was pale and covered in a cold sweat, her hands trembling as she held her prize. The crowd slowly began to disperse, the spectacle of violence replaced by a heavy, awkward silence. People avoided that particular aisle for the rest of the night as if the air there was tainted. I watched from the end of the aisle, my own shopping basket empty and my holiday spirit extinguished. I couldn't help but wonder how a plastic toy could drive a human being to such savagery. As I walked to my car, the cold night air bit at my skin, matching the chill in my heart. I thought about the child who would eventually receive that gift, unaware of its violent history. But as I drove away, I noticed a strange, tattered figure standing by the roadside, watching the store with a blood-stained clipboard. The figure slowly turned its head toward my passing car, and I realized the nightmare of this Christmas was only just beginning. The figure slowly turned its head toward my passing car, and I realized the nightmare of this Christmas was only just beginning. I couldn't simply drive away and ignore the image of that shivering soul in the rearview mirror. The spirit of the season demanded more than just a fleeting thought of pity. I pulled my car to the curb and let the engine die with a low rumble. The silence that followed was heavy and cold, pressing against the glass of the windshield. I reached into the passenger seat for the warm bag of food I had just purchased for myself. It felt right to share this small comfort with someone who clearly had nothing left. As I stepped out of the car, the sub-zero air bit into my skin like 1,000 needles. The street was abandoned, the festive lights of the neighborhood feeling miles away in this dark corner. I noticed that the figure hadn't moved a muscle since I had first spotted him. He looked like a pile of discarded rags left to freeze in the gutter. I walked toward the alley, my boots crunching rhythmically on the frozen slush. Every step I took seemed to echo too loudly against the narrow brick walls. "Hey there," I said softly, not wanting to startle the man in the darkness. There was no response, not even a slight shift in his posture. "I thought you might be hungry on a night like this," I continued, holding out the bag. I was now only 5 feet away, and the smell of rot and old grease filled the air. I could see his hands now, and they were stained a dark, crusty color. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly with the cold. Suddenly, the figure let out a sound that wasn't quite human, a low, guttural rattle. I flinched, nearly dropping the bag as the sound echoed off the bricks. He began to stand up, his joints popping with a sickening, audible crack. He was much taller than he had appeared while sitting down, towering over me. The hood fell back, revealing eyes that were wide, bloodshot, and completely devoid of sanity. I tried to step back, but my foot slipped on a patch of black ice. Before I could recover, his hand shot out with impossible speed and gripped my throat. I clawed at his fingers, but they felt like iron bands tightening around my windpipe. He didn't want the food. He wanted something far more visceral from me. I felt my back slam against the cold brick wall as he pinned me with raw strength. The paper bag fell to the snow, spilling the warm burger into the filth. "Merry Christmas," he whispered, his breath smelling of copper and decay. I saw the glint of a jagged piece of metal held in his other hand. He raised the makeshift weapon, his eyes dancing with a manic delight. I kicked out wildly, my boot connecting with his shin in a desperate bid for freedom. He let out a shriek of rage and momentarily loosened his grip on my throat. I didn't wait to see if he would recover. I turned and scrambled toward the street. My lungs burned with the icy air as I reached the safety of the sidewalk. I looked back and saw him standing at the mouth of the alley watching me. He wasn't chasing me, he was just smiling, and that was somehow worse. I fumbled for my car keys, my hands shaking so violently I dropped them in the snow. As I bent down, I heard the faint sound of footsteps crunching behind me, but they weren't coming from the alley. A second figure, dressed in an identical tattered jacket, emerged from behind my own car. The memory of that Monday afternoon still feels like a cold weight in my chest. It was exactly 1 week before Christmas when I arrived home from my holiday job. There, sitting on the front porch, was a plain brown package addressed to my father. I noticed the words "handle with care" written clearly across the rough paper wrapping. When I picked it up, the box felt significantly heavier than its size suggested. I assumed it was an expensive holiday gift, perhaps some fine dishware or a new car stereo. I left it on the kitchen table, expecting the mystery to be solved on Christmas morning. My mother returned home a few hours later, followed by my father at 6 in the evening. We pointed out the delivery to him as he set down his briefcase and prepared some coffee. Mom suggested he wait until Christmas to open it, but Dad pointed out there were no festive markings. Since it only bore his name, he concluded it was likely related to his import-export business. Mom joked that if it turned out to be something edible, he better be prepared to share. He gave a small nod and carried the box upstairs to his private office. I finished my coffee and headed into the family room to relax in front of the television. I called out to the kitchen, asking my mother when dinner would finally be ready. My sentence was cut short by a tremendous, bone-shaking bang from directly above us. Mom and I collided in the hallway, both of us sprinting toward the stairs in a panic. She reached the office door first, throwing it open before I could stop her. A thick, acrid smell of burning chemicals immediately flooded the hallway. Mom began to scream, a sound so visceral it didn't even seem human. I caught a split-second glimpse of the room before I slammed the door shut to protect her. The office was a nightmare of destruction. It was clear my father was gone instantly. My mind went into a strange state of emotional shutdown just so I could function. My only priority was my mother, who was suffering a complete nervous breakdown in front of me. I forced her to focus on the 911 operator, handing her the phone with trembling hands. She couldn't even speak through the wailing, so I had to take over and explain the horror. It was the single worst experience of my life, a trauma that would never truly heal. Even years later, the most haunting part is that we still don't know who sent that package. The only clue we ever had was the strange behavior of my father's employers. Dad worked for a high-stakes import-export company operating out of Los Angeles and San Diego. In the immediate aftermath, they were suspiciously helpful with funeral costs and insurance. But as soon as I began asking questions about his actual job, they completely shut down. They claimed that providing details about his daily duties was against strict company policy. The police told us the company was doing the bare minimum required by law while stonewalling the investigation. His official job title was product acquisition, but no one would explain what that really meant. Investigators eventually suspected my father had been the target of a professional corporate hitman. The bomb was so expertly constructed that it left virtually no forensic trail for the authorities to follow. My resentment toward those people has only grown as the years have passed. I believe they have intimate knowledge of why my father was murdered that Christmas. But as I dug through his old locked briefcase today, I found a list of names that weren't on any official company roster. The names I found in my father's briefcase hinted at shadows that stretched far across the Atlantic to the Old World. Ireland is a land where the lush green grass has often been watered by the blood of ancient conflicts. My grandfather grew up in a place called Kilmoola, a village that has since been erased from every modern map. He always insisted that Kilmoola was cursed, a location where terrible things were destined to happen. In the winter of 1943, the Flaherty family decided to host their annual Christmas shindig despite the growing darkness of the era. They owned a small whiskey distillery on the banks of the River Blackwater, making their parties legendary and crowded. As December began, a chilling note was found pinned to the Flaherty's front door by a rusted dagger. The message warned that their lack of reverence for the holy season would bring dire consequences if they proceeded. Joseph Flaherty, the family patriarch, was furious and demanded to know which neighbor had dared to threaten him. He viewed the threat as the work of a lone killjoy and decided to make the party larger and more decadent than ever. Word spread across the county that the Flahertys were serving fine French champagne smuggled in from Dublin. On Christmas Eve, the house was packed with people from every corner of Monaghan dancing to a live fiddle band. As the music died down in the early hours, the guests collapsed wherever they could find a square inch of floor. The heavy scent of whiskey and peat smoke hung in the air as nearly 30 people fell into a deep slumber. Outside, the snow muffled the sound of heavy boots approaching the farmhouse from the direction of the woods. The invaders did not knock. They slipped through the unlocked back door like ghosts entering a tomb. Armed with long, serrated knives, they began to move from room to room with practiced, silent efficiency. The first victims never even opened their eyes, feeling only a sudden coldness before the end. When a young woman in the parlor woke up and tried to scream, the killers abandoned their silence for speed. The sound of struggle and the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor began to echo through the stone walls. My great-uncle was one of the few who managed to stand up and fight back against the attackers. The killers produced pistols and fired into the darkness to finish what their blades could not. By dawn, the music had been replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush the village. When the village elders finally arrived to investigate the lack of returning guests, they found the front door wide open. The scene inside was a nightmare of red and white, where festive decorations were soaked in the tragedy of the night. Every single person who had attended the party was found dead, arranged in their final places of rest. Nailed to the door once more was a final note that contained only 3 words: "We warned them." My great-grandmother was destroyed by the news that her son had died in such a horrific manner. The local police were baffled by how 3 men could commit such a large-scale massacre without being heard. The boot prints led straight to the River Blackwater and then simply vanished into the icy current. Some villagers believed the killers were not men at all, but spirits summoned by the curse of the land. My grandfather disagreed, stating that humans are capable of far greater evil than any ghost. He believed they were fanatical extremists who had planned the massacre with military precision. Despite months of searching and questioning every priest in the county, no suspects were ever identified. The village of Kilmoola never recovered from the Black Christmas of 1943. One by one, the families moved away, leaving their homes to the rot and the ivy. But my grandfather took one secret to his grave that he only whispered to me once. He claimed that one of the killers had left behind a distinctive silver signet ring in the struggle. It was the exact same crest I now saw embossed on the stationery inside my father's locked briefcase. As I realized the connection, a heavy knock echoed from the front door, exactly like the one that started the nightmare in 1943. The heavy knock on my door in the present day felt like an echo of the violence from the past. But as the shadows of 1943 faded, a new nightmare from 1985 began to take shape in the winter chill of Washington state. In the small town of Ethel, Ed and Minnie Morin were the embodiment of a peaceful, well-spent life. Ed was 81 and Minnie was 83, yet they remained fiercely independent on their family farm. They had been married for over half a century, pillars of their local church and community. But on the morning of December 19th, the routine of their quiet lives was abruptly and mysteriously broken. Family members arrived to find the house strangely quiet and the couple's green 1969 Chrysler Newport missing. Inside, the home appeared undisturbed, yet there was no sign of Ed or Minnie anywhere. A cryptic phone message left for their son raised alarms, though it contained no explicit cry for help. Neighbors recalled seeing the couple earlier that morning, but their trail vanished shortly after they left the property. Desperate calls to their home went unanswered as the Lewis County Sheriff's Office began an exhaustive search. For 5 agonizing days, the community held its breath while investigators scoured the frozen landscape. The search ended in horror on Christmas Eve when their bodies were found in a remote wooded area near Adna. Both Ed and Minnie had been executed with a single shot to the back of the head. The scene was chilling, indicating the couple had been forced to kneel before they were murdered in cold blood. Investigators soon realized the Morons had been abducted from their home earlier that week. Evidence suggested they were coerced into withdrawing $8,500 from their bank account. Their missing Chrysler was found abandoned in a supermarket parking lot, its interior stained with blood. News of the brutality sent shockwaves through the close-knit community of Ethel. Vigils were held as neighbors struggled to understand how such kindness could be met with such malice. Despite the outpouring of support, the initial investigation faced significant hurdles. Witness descriptions of the suspects were inconsistent, and forensic leads were scarce in the pre-DNA era. Detectives believed the crime was financially motivated, yet the execution-style killings felt personal. Years turned into decades, and the case of the Morin murders slowly grew cold. However, the family never gave up hope, constantly pushing for the truth to be unearthed. In 2012, nearly 30 years later, advances in forensic technology provided a long-awaited breakthrough. The evidence led directly to Rick Reif, a man who had long been a person of interest in the community. Rick and his brother John were suspected of targeting the couple specifically for their life savings. Witnesses finally came forward, revealing they had heard Rick boast about the killings in the years since. The 2013 trial captivated Lewis County as over 100 witnesses took the stand. Prosecutors painted a chilling picture of abduction, robbery, and the cold-blooded elimination of witnesses. Reif maintained his innocence, claiming the evidence was too old and purely circumstantial. But the jury saw through the facade, finding him guilty on all counts of murder, kidnapping, and robbery. For the family, the sentence of life without parole brought closure, though the loss remained a permanent scar. The Morin murders serve as a stark reminder of the darkness that can hide in the quietest of places. Today they are remembered not for the horror of their end, but for the kindness of their lives. Every Christmas a wreath is laid at their grave, a symbol of a community that refuses to forget. But as one mystery was solved, another began to emerge from the shadows of a Nashville Christmas. I reached for the door handle as the knocking continued, my heart hammering against my ribs. As the door creaked open, I saw a tattered Christmas tree left on the porch, but the person who knocked was already gone, leaving only a blood-stained golden ribbon. The blood-stained golden ribbon left on the porch felt like a final, cryptic invitation to follow a trail of holiday sorrow. On a crisp December morning in 1996, the peaceful calm of Alexandria, Virginia, was shattered by a chilling discovery. In a small, serene cemetery nestled between the headstones, a groundskeeper found something that didn't belong. There, reclining on a plastic sheet, lay the lifeless body of an unidentified woman. She appeared to have passed peacefully, her head resting on a clear bag filled with shredded green and white Christmas tinsel. Her attire was unremarkable, consisting of a blue trench coat, a sweater, and slacks, all neatly arranged. Beside her, a small artificial Christmas tree stood as a silent sentinel, adorned with golden ribbons matching the one found earlier. The most striking detail was the total absence of any outward signs of struggle or violence. Authorities would later conclude she died from a lethal combination of alcohol and antihistamines. She was estimated to be between 50 and 70 years of age with graying auburn hair and glasses. She carried no identification, and her fingerprints were not found in any national database. A cryptic note was found among her belongings that only deepened the mystery. The note read, "Deceased, prefer no autopsy, please order cremation with funds provided. Thank you, Jane Doe." Attached to the note was a single $50 bill, a final request for anonymity. Also found was a portable cassette player with 2 tapes containing classical and religious music. Why had she chosen this particular cemetery for her final moments? Investigators searched burial records for a connection to a lost loved one, but found nothing. Some theorized she was a widow or someone who had recently suffered a devastating personal tragedy. Her clean and well-maintained appearance contradicted the idea that she might have been homeless. The presence of the artificial Christmas tree seemed like a deliberate gesture of longing for connection. Or perhaps it was a dark mockery of the season of joy and togetherness. Authorities pursued every lead, releasing sketches of the woman to the national media. Despite the publicity, no one ever came forward to claim her or identify her. She became known to the world simply as the Christmas Tree Lady. Her story serves as a poignant reminder of the hidden struggles many faced during the holidays. For nearly 30 years, her identity remained one of Alexandria's most haunting unsolved mysteries. Recently, advances in genetic genealogy have offered a new glimmer of hope for her true name. Every Christmas, a small group of locals leaves a wreath at the site where she was found. It is a symbol of the love and respect she inspired even in her absolute solitude. As we look back on these 8 nightmares that made the naughty list, we are reminded of the fragility of peace. The man in the Santa suit was caught. The corporate hitmen remain in the shadows, and the Christmas tree lady finally has some peace. The Morin family found their justice after 30 years, proving that the truth eventually surfaces. The holiday season is a time for joy, but these stories teach us to remain vigilant even in the glow of the lights. We remember those who were lost, honoring their memories by sharing their stories. The darkness can never fully extinguish the light of human kindness and the pursuit of justice. May your Christmas be safe, your doors be locked, and your heart be full of genuine cheer. Thanks for listening to these tales from the Naughty List, and remember to click that notification bell. I release new narrations every Monday and Thursday, so stay tuned for more true scary stories. Your support on Patreon and through channel memberships allows these stories to keep being told. Stay safe out there, friends, and remember that even in the most festive times, the shadows are never far away.